The tale I'm about to share still sends shivers down my spine, a stark reminder that sometimes the most horrifying monsters are human. This story, my story, is a testament to the darkest depths of human nature, encountered during what was supposed to be an adventurous stealth camping trip in the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest. It was late September, and the allure of solitude amidst the nature's untouched beauty was too tempting to resist. I was an experienced camper, having spent countless nights under the stars, but this time I sought the thrill of stealth camping, settling down in a place where few would dare to tread, far from the eyes of the world. My chosen spot was deep within the woods, miles from the nearest trail, a hidden gem I had stumbled upon on the satellite maps. The first night passed in peaceful serenity, with only the sounds of the nocturnal creatures breaking the silence. However, the second night was when the true horror began. As I settled into my tent, the crackling of a fire not too far off caught my attention. Stealth camping meant solitude, and the presence of another fire meant I wasn't alone. Curiosity piqued, I decided to investigate, a decision I would soon regret. Approaching the source, I saw a group of figures huddled around the fire. They were not ordinary campers. Their faces, illuminated by the flickering flames, bore expressions of malice. I retreated, intended to pack up at first light and leave this foreboding place, but fate had other plans. That night, as I lay in my tent trying to convince myself I was safe, I heard whispers cutting through the still air, coming closer and closer. Someone or something was outside my tent, murmuring unintelligibly with a menacing tone. Paralyzed by fear, I lay there hoping they would pass. But then a shadow loomed over my tent and a voice hissed, "We know you're here." Panic took over me and I scrambled out of the tent, only to find myself face to face with one of the figures from the fire. His eyes, cold and devoid of empathy, bore into mine as he took a step forward. In that moment, I realized I was not dealing with ordinary humans, but predators in human form, hunting for their next prey. I ran. The forest became a labyrinth in the darkness, branches clawing at me as I pushed through. Behind me, the sound of pursuit, footsteps breaking twigs, the occasional flash of a light. They were playing a game, and I was the quarry. Dawn was my savior, offering enough light to find a hidden ravine that I slipped into, concealing myself until the sounds of my pursuers faded away. I waited for what felt like an eternity, until the forest reclaimed its tranquility, a deceptive peace. When I finally emerged, it was with the realization that wilderness wasn't just home to the beauty and the beasts of nature, but also to human monsters thriving in the shadows. My escape was nothing short of a miracle, a harrowing ordeal that ended with me stumbling onto a ranger's path who escorted me back to civilization. This experience has left me with scars that run deeper than the physical, a haunting reminder of the night I came face to face with the most dangerous predator of all, man. So to those who seek the thrill of solitude and the embrace of the wild, let my story be a warning. The woods whisper with the voices of unseen dangers, and sometimes the most terrifying horrors are those that walk on two legs, hiding in plain sight, waiting for their next victim. I share this story with a heavy heart, a chilling reminder of the thin veil between adventure and catastrophe. My love for the uncharted led me to a secluded forest known only to a few for its breathtaking views and the sense of isolation it offered. It was supposed to be a weekend of disconnecting, a stealth camping trip to test my survival skills away from the prying eyes of civilization. Little did I know it would turn into a horrifying ordeal that would question my trust in humanity forever. The journey began under the cloak of dawn, with excitement coursing through my veins. The forest greeted me with its dense canopy and a carpet of leaves, a world away from the noise of the city. My destination was a hidden glen miles off the beaten path, discovered through hours of meticulous research. The first day was everything I had hoped for, a serene communion with nature, the kind of peace you can only find in solitude. But as night descended, the forest seemed to transform. The once comforting rustle of leaves turned sinister, as if concealing whispers. I shook off the unease, attributing it to the overactive imagination of a solo camper. However, the unease grew into dread when they found footprints circling my campsite the next morning, not my own, a silent testament that I was being watched. The rational part of me wanted to leave, but pride and stubbornness anchored me. I convinced myself it was just another camper, or perhaps a ranger making rounds. Yet as the day melted into evening, the sense of being observed became overwhelming. Every snap of a twig, every shadow cast by the setting sun seemed deliberate, menacing even. It was on the second night that my fears materialized into a palpable threat. A sudden chill woke me, not from the cold, but from the realization that my tent zipper was slowly being drawn open. Frozen in fear, I peered through a sliver of opening, my breath caught in my throat. There, silhouetted against the moonlit night, was the figure of a man, his features obscured, his intentions clear as he peered into my tent with a predatory gaze. In a moment of sheer instinct, I acted. With a shout, I lunged forward, startling the intruder. He stumbled back and I seized the moment to escape, bolting from my tent into the night. The forest, once a sanctuary, became a maze of shadows and danger. Behind me, I could hear the intruder giving chase, his footsteps a constant echo of menace. The chase seemed endless, a terrifying game of cat and mouse until by some stroke of luck I emerged onto a road, my appearance startling a passing motorist who screeched to a halt. The headlights illuminated my pursuer for a fleeting moment, revealing a face twisted in frustration before he disappeared back into the darkness of the woods. The driver, seeing my distress, called for help, and within hours I was recounting my story to the authorities. The search that followed turned up nothing, no sign of the mysterious stalker, as if he had vanished into the ether, leaving me with nothing but the haunting memory of that night. This experience has etched a deep mark on my soul, a constant reminder that in the pursuit of adventure we sometimes find ourselves face to face with dangers we never imagined. The forest with all its beauty and allure holds secrets, some of them dark, hidden just beyond the reach of the trails we walk. My tale is a cautionary one, a plea to those who seek the thrill of the unknown to tread lightly, for not all who wander are lost, but some unfortunately find more than they seek. My passion for stealth camping led me to a remote part of the Appalachian Trail, an area less trodden where the woods whispered secrets of old. This trip was meant to be my escape from the world, a journey into the heart of the wilderness to find peace away from the chaos of everyday life. However, it morphed into a harrowing ordeal that tested the very limits of my courage. I had set up camp in a secluded clearing, miles from the nearest official campsite, surrounded by towering pines that seemed to watch over me. The first day passed without incident, the forest's natural beauty lulling me into a false sense of security. But as night descended, a feeling of unease crept over me, an intuition that I wasn't alone. I brushed off the feeling as nerves, the product of a too active imagination. Yet as I sat by my fire, the crackling of the flames was intermittently broke by the sound of footsteps, deliberate, careful, stopping just at the edge of the light's reach. Each time I looked, there was nothing but the dense thicket of trees and darkness. Convincing myself it was just wildlife, I retreated to my tent. But sleep eluded me, every sound amplified in the silent darkness. It was then I heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible rustling. Not of an animal, but of something, someone, moving with purpose through the underbrush. Morning brought no relief, only the discovery of belongings subtly tampered with, things moved but not taken, a psychological game played by the unseen visitor. The message was clear, I was being watched, toyed with. Panic set in, the isolation I had sought now a trap. I decided to leave, to pack up and find my way back to civilization. But the forest had other plans. As I tried to retrace my steps, markers I had left were gone. Landmarks seemed unfamiliar and the thick fog had rolled in, disorienting me further. It was as if the forest itself was conspiring to keep me there, lost and vulnerable. The real terror began when I realized I was being herded. Subtle noises and the occasional glimpse of a figure in the periphery of my vision guided me away from my intended path. I was no longer a visitor in these woods. I had become prey in a twisted hunt. The hunter remained unseen, a ghostly presence that seemed to anticipate my every move. Exhaustion and fear took their toll, leading me to a small clearing as night fell once again. There, surrounded by the oppressive darkness, I prepared for the worst. But it was the silence that night that was most terrifying, a complete absence of sound, as if the forest itself held its breath. The climax of my ordeal came with the dawn, a break in the fog revealing a path that led me back to familiar territory. I stumbled onto a trail used by hikers, my relief immeasurable. I never saw who or what stalked me in those woods, but the psychological torment left deep scars, a lasting reminder of my vulnerability. Reflecting on my experience, I realized the wilderness is not just a place of beauty and tranquility, but also a realm where the human mind can become its own worst enemy. The unseen observer in the woods that night remains a mystery, a shadowy figure that might have been a figment of my overwrought imagination, or perhaps something far more sinister, a reminder of the dangers that lurk when we venture into the unknown, seeking solitude but finding our deepest fears instead. This is a tale of unintended consequences, of a journey that was supposed to lead to self-discovery, but instead veered into the depths of human depravity. It began with a desire to break free from the confines of society, to find solace in the wilderness, far from the maddening crowd. My destination was an isolated spot deep within the Rocky Mountains, known only to a select few who dared to venture beyond the map's edge. It was here amidst the ancient giants that I sought refuge, a place where I could be alone with my thoughts, untouched by the world. But as I would soon discover, some places are untouched for a reason. The journey in was uneventful, the serene beauty of the forest a balm to my weary soul. I set up camp in a small clearing, the mountains standing sentinel around me. That first night under a blanket of stars, I felt peace I hadn't felt in years. However, by the second day, that peace would be shattered. I awoke to find an arrow notched into a tree just beyond my camp. Carved into the wood was a message, leave or else. The warning was clear, but who it came from or why was a mystery. I considered packing up, but dismissed the threat as a prank by locals unwelcoming to outsiders. I decided to stay, a decision that would plunge me into a nightmare. That night, the sounds of the forest were different. There was an undercurrent of something sinister in the rustling leaves and the wind's mournful howl. I tried to sleep, but was jolted awake by the unmistakable feeling of being watched. Peering out my tent, I saw nothing but the impenetrable darkness of the forest. Yet the sensation persisted, an oppressive weight that told me I was not alone. The next morning, my campsite was vandalized, my supplies scattered and destroyed. But it was the message left for me that chilled me to the bone. Last warning. The handwriting matched the carving on the tree. This was no prank, it was a threat. Panic set in. I was days from civilization, alone and clearly in danger. I packed what remained of my gear and set out to leave, but the forest had become a labyrinth. Paths that once were clear now seemed to lead nowhere. It was as if the forest itself was conspiring against me, trapping me within its embrace. As I wandered, disoriented and afraid, I began to hear whispers, voices just on the edge of hearing, mocking me, leading me further into the wilderness. I ran, terror lending speed to my steps, but the voices followed, always just behind me, always just out of sight. It was on the third night that my pursuer revealed himself, a man, or what once might have been a man, his appearance wild, his eyes alight with madness. He spoke of the forest as his domain, a sanctuary from the world he despised, and of me as an intruder who must be purged. He claimed to be the forest guardian, his avenger against the encroachment of civilization. I fled into the night, the madman in pursuit. The chase was a blur of fear and desperation, a fight for survival against a foe who knew the terrain as only one who had become part of it could. It ended at the edge of the precipice, the ground crumbling beneath my feet, sending me tumbling into the darkness below. Miraculously, I survived the fall, though battered and broken. I was found by hikers the next day, my story a disjointed tale of terror and madness. The authorities searched but found no trace of my pursuer. The guardian of the forest vanished as if he were nothing more than a figment of my imagination. But the scars I bear, both physical and mental, are all too real. I had sought the wilderness for peace, but instead I found a darkness that lay not in the forest, but in the heart of a man who had lost himself to it. My tale serves as a warning that sometimes the greatest danger we face in the quest for solitude is not from the wild, but from those who dwell within it on the very edge of sanity.